sir. And I would also add that Mr. Davenport is also in Europe, in the Netherlands, doing some of that broadband data center research with our team in the Netherlands. Our first briefing today, members of council, is it's been about 90 days since Ron Williams, our Deputy City Manager for Economic Vitality, gave us a work plan for how we might go about creating a entertainment district at the Central Beach area of our resort. And so I've invited Ron to come back and give us an update on the things as they are proceeding, so that you all remain up to date on the activities of staff and other associated development.
Okay, Vice Mayor, members of council, good afternoon. So as you recall, back in February, we talked about essentially what this work plan for the entertainment district, the 19th Street Central Beach district, was going to be for this year. That it was aggressive. Some of this was based on years of work. But as a reminder, we were talking about the arena, and at the time, where that was in February, the Vibe District, the Dome site, the Field House, a convention center, hotel, and then parking analysis and facilities that might be needed. We're going to go through that, where we stand on all those projects, and then recommendations to meet those goals and next steps. Of course, all of this work plan supports two of your council goals: grow the local economy and be a competitive first-class resort for residents, business, and tourists. The work is based, of course, on the Resort Strategic Action Plan, and focusing on the next key strategic corridor, Central Beach District, 19th Street, considering that Laskin Gateway is, for the most part, completed in its work and vision there. And that the development patterns and the facilities in here are based on a concept for a comprehensive plan from 2014 that we repeatedly see with this bird's eye view with the arena slotted in there. We develop the goals, the understanding that in order to be a year-round destination and to capture markets that we know we can capture, that we need a new product. And so with the Victus study, we looked at an indoor sports market facility in order to meet the demand that we have with the current use of the convention center, that we need to successfully compete in the convention center business, and there was product that's needed for that. That the Vibe District is growing organically, and also that CIP projects could help enhance that and how it networks in with all these facilities in the neighborhoods there, to activate the Dome site and re-engage the development interest there, and then to make sure that we're utilizing all parking analysis and assets in order to meet those demands. So the arena, where do we stand with that? Of course, this is the concept that has been on our plans, and that was part of the development agreement. We've got the on-site arena improvements that we have had as part of city contribution that are highlighted in the orange, and then the maroon off-site improvements that are now 100% designed and ready for bid. We have been working with the development team over the past month, 6 weeks, on the preliminary site plan review. This is where we stand with that, and I'll bring that up in the next slide. But we're having weekly meetings with cross-portfolio departmental review of this. It's a unique scenario because some of the infrastructure for the site plan, obviously, we're investing in. And so it's part regulator hat that we wear, and then part also bill payer, making sure that we remain in the scope for what we agree to. So those team meetings have been fruitful to make sure that, so we're not waiting until it's completely designed. We're getting early input prior to these designs for permit submittal. The loan closing with USM is expected in June, and that's great news. It moves up the construction schedule, which really potentially alleviates some challenges we'll have in the area with the convention center. And because of that closing in June, we expect site work to begin in June as well. So that's our target. The teams make sure they got head down in our reviews and in our input. We're making sure that we be timely with that. And to give you a little bit of a detail about that, the site plan is evolving. We've made a couple more adjustments to this site plan in the past week. But predominantly what I want to highlight is that how the plaza area is complementing the arena here. It was in the concepts before. These are our surface areas, the new BMP. And what this hatching is showing here is that it's conceived that this will either be concrete or pavers that make up that area, so that it's flexible multi-use for both parking for some events or parking in off-arena event days, but also can be activated as the pedestrian plaza. And it really makes for a great space for pre-arena events, but also how it connects and complements with the convention center, creating more of a complex, a campus feel there when you have, especially when you have multiple events going on at the same time. So that's our work to date on the arena, and it's very positive news. The dome site update, when we last left you in February, of course, we were discussing the development, as has been for many years, of the parcels at 19th, 20th Street, Pacific, and Arctic Avenue, but then also adding to it in recent years the Treasurer's Lot. And that those 10-plus acres, with the vision that we had laid out, we were going to seek a request for qualifications for a development operator partner, and that we were seeking, certain key aspects, having vetted proposals, having proposals that we almost had development of, and understanding where the market was and what opportunity we had to complement both the oceanfront and the convention center and arena facilities nestled in the Vibe district, what type of uses we were looking at. We had a good response from four teams. The breeding companies partnering with Live Nation, IMG, and the ARC Group out of North Carolina. The Cordish companies, local ESG companies with AEG, AECom, and SB Ballard, Venture Realty with WM Jordan, WPL, Clark Nixon, H2O Investments, and Pinnacle Venue Services. The review committee is a combination of your council liaisons and VBDA members and key staff. And the review committee has had one meeting to have an initial review of the RFQ responses. And now our next steps are to set up interviews. They are scheduled throughout the month of May. And what we envision is that this is going to be the interview process will vet the capacity and the vision of the teams that have been selected. And I emphasize operator here because it is one thing to build a facility. It's another thing to operate it long-term and make sure that's successful, financially sustainable, that it has the right tenant mix and can be managed properly. And so that's what we're looking for. The selection phase will realistically take a couple months at a minimum. And then we hope to be able to select one or two of the teams to start to negotiate to try to get to terms to deliver this vision. During the pre-development phase, we do expect to have public engagement and based on some visions that are shared in those negotiations. And then we want to get to a concept that we can agree to, a development agreement that will have performance measures in there to make sure that the development actually does happen. That's where we are with the dome site. Any questions on that? Now, in February, we had just come on the heels of the Brad's presentation to you from the Victa study about the need for a field house. And it was a concept at that time. And through the winter, we have continued our analysis and into the spring with the Victa study. What did it mean? What's the market? What are the right mixes? We've talked to operators from here to California. We have talked to many developers to understand constructability. And we've gone on some tours to really touch and feel two of the newest that are in our mid-Atlantic competitive market. The Myrtle Beach Sports Center, which is municipally owned, significant investment by the state of South Carolina in this facility. It's a very basic facility, but it gave us some good benchmarking to understand the type of hardcourt facility that we're looking at, which is the predominant use. We're not looking, as the Victa study recommended, for turf in this. This is hardcourt use And this one gave us a footprint that we had been analyzing for potential siting here, and we wanted to understand how this one worked. And so that was a good benchmark for the team. And then the Upward Star Center, this is privately owned. If you're familiar with the Upward Church Leagues, it is a very successful, almost like recreation program. And this is their world headquarters. And it has significant demand just in the first year since they built it. Some great lessons learned on what they should and shouldn't do, as was in the case in Myrtle Beach. So we've gleaned from that. And of course, we still continue to have demand like we did this past weekend in the convention center. This was over the weekend. Brad, you want to comment about this tournament?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Ron. This was a first-time tournament that we had in Virginia Beach, called the Virginia Beach Classic. This was one of 2 weekends that the NCAA allowed Coach Look weekend with college coaches coming to view and scout high school talent. This was a girls' high school tournament, first time at Virginia Beach, had 134 teams, generated probably in the neighborhood of 2,000 to 2,500 room nights and probably above 4,000 people participating with this tournament. This, of course, is inside the convention center. Used 2 halls in the convention center. They put down the sport court flooring for the flooring to play on, and it was a very successful event. As I said, it was the first time they've been here in Virginia Beach. The organizers of this tournament do these tournaments all over the country, and they were very complimentary of our convention center staff and our sports marketing staff and of Virginia Beach. They loved having the layout that we had for them. They loved the free parking that we had them for them. They had the same tournament in Raleigh 2 weekends ago. They had over 400 teams there, turned away over 100 teams, so there's a lot more demand than can be supplied right now for these type of events. And we'd love to see them come back again. We're waiting to hear probably in the next week or two what the NCAA does as far as dates and whether they'll do it, allow it for 1 weekend or 2 weekends next year. But it's just a type of event that we should see more of in Virginia Beach with the right facilities. So thank you.
So as we established some assumptions as we've looked at the potential siting for this, for the project that is in the manager's CIP. Number one, no acquisition of property, that we own parcels in and around the entertainment district that were appropriate for siting this. That it not be located at the dome site, that the dome site was a different development use mix, and that the square footage and the location are not as complementary as having it closer to the convention center. It must be able to handle at least 175,000 square feet. We're looking a little north of that right now based on the number of courts that we see. Parking must be available. That it's proximity to the ocean front, but not further west than Bird Neck, essentially, or the west side of the convention center. And then that it must be tip funded and not from the general fund, as is the case in the manager's CIP right now. So we settled on 4 potential sites, and this is the analysis that we've continued to do with both internal staff and getting advice and input from operators and contractors as well about the issues surrounding these. And let me quickly run through where we are with these. So the first site was Site A, location A. Looking at it across from the ballroom of the convention center. And the challenge with this site is that as we've better understand the operations and the support that's needed, we need areas for the teams for camping, so to speak, to spread out. Concessions are very appropriate. You need some storage. That the site is very challenged in trying to fit in that north to south part between 19th and 18th Street, and so you're constraining the facility and its functionality. The other key piece of this site is that it cuts off your interstate access, which is really key for the arena or anything south of 19th Street, because your Parks Avenue essentially is a direct connection to the interstate. And taking away that connectivity from a transportation perspective is not good for the complex, the facilities in the area. So we're not recommending this site. The next one was, okay, well, can you move it west and put it closer and more adjacent to the arena? The main challenge here is that it encroaches in the arena complex and the plaza. And it takes away, again, that great opportunity for how the plaza serves as an external connected piece between the convention center and the arena. All of these have some utility challenges, but none of them are insurmountable. And that's what I'm highlighting up here in the right corner. You'll see here where we have some stormwater and water utilities, but they can be moved. Our recommended site at this time is location C. And predominantly because it does have a nice complement in its co-location with the convention center on that side of 19th Street and directly across from the arena. But also because it retains the ability for the convention center to be expanded, and it can handle the size of several different designs of field house models on that site. And so that's where we're settling on. It does have, again, like some of the other sites, some utility challenges. You'll see a big stormwater culvert running underneath there, but we believe we can relocate that and work within that site. The backup alternative would be connecting it to the convention center. That's not recommended, but we'll keep that as a backup as we continue to look at how the constructability and cost of this. But that's not recommended because you would deny your ability to expand the convention center in the future. So the scope, we've continued to refine the scope based on the VICTA study and based on what Brad and his team are seeing in the market, based on what we learned from the other facilities and input from the industry. And we're finalizing this and readying it for when we're teed up to do an RFP for the facility. Now, in all this, we said back in February, of course, we need to understand the context of parking and what we have now, what we've agreed to, particularly with the arena development, and how we manage these type of events. As it stands right now with the arena development, pre-development, we have 2,211 spaces that exist. With the conceptual preliminary site plan that we have right now, we're constructing just north of 3,000 spaces. That does help us meet our development agreement for the 2,700 spaces dedicated to the arena, and then has 300 spaces for the convention center anytime there's a large event of 6,500. But we've thrown in two development projects that change those scenarios. Number one, it triggers the arena development agreement lease agreement requirement that in the replacement parking area, equivalent number of spaces must be replaced. And so the field house constructed west of the convention center eliminates approximately 550 spaces. And then the treasurer's lot at the dome site that we have as part of the off-site arena construction is 328 spaces. And so if we're developing the dome site, that asset, it needs to be replaced as well. And as a reminder, this is the replacement parking area that for any redevelopment that you have to replace. So it's not only, though, the trigger of the agreement, but we're layering in two additional uses with a demand, one of which primarily the field house is in the same season as the arena and the convention center. And so we have additional demand that we're adding. We have the replacement requirement, so we're making recommendations to make adjustments for that. Number one would be some consideration, and this needs to be explored, and the city attorney and I were discussing it earlier yesterday, one day ago, about how, if at all, can we tap into any of the assets at the oceanfront that are privately owned that could be used for events. We do have some specificity in our code that we need to explore on that and see could that be part of the inventory. And secondly, that we have a contractor that will be mobilized in June. We have the ability to buy spaces at a really great price because of that mobilization or demobilization that would occur or not occur. The contractor is mobilized, the price could be right, and the asset that feeds into all the uses of the facility, the field house, the convention center, and the arena, it would be heavily utilized. So we're recommending that, similar to the 2014 vision that's been laid out here, that the placement of a garage next to the arena on 17th Street can be met within the arena on-site improvements, and that would give us an additional 1,500 spaces that the field house now is going to start to generate a demand for. The fourth demand for this would be that when the field house is being utilized more for the sports marketing, the convention center business and convention business should pick up as well. And so you're going to have that fourth demand on site for parking of those 3,000 spaces. So this would give us north of 4,400 spaces by doing this. So continue with this work plan that we laid out. Our next steps would be that we continue to refine those adjustments for the field house, its siting, its scope, its size, and the parking demand that it enters into the mix. That size at north of 2,400 again gives the demand that the facility, we know that when we're parked with a sports travel event, that predominantly most of the parking, surface parking in the area is utilized. The dome site interviews, as I said, will be conducted throughout May. If we are building that parking structure, rather than the surface parking, we're just going vertical with it, then we will need to amend the development agreement, and that would be done post-loan closing in June. The arena construction will start, and then we're going to want to RFP the field house once the new fiscal year starts.
That it?
Yes, sir.
Any questions for Ron? Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. How much debt, since I know this council as a body is very concerned about our debt margin and how we're using it, and obviously it's not available for flooding, so it's available for this. So how much debt is the field house, and how much debt, additional debt over and above what we had for the arena, does each of these options cost in terms of cost? How much debt is that? And how does that add to the debt margin that we could have used for flooding, but we're choosing this as a higher priority? I'm just trying to understand how we're allocating our debt service across these projects.
I think right now our analysis of the additional dollar that we have that the hoteliers are adding to their nightly rates generates in a 5-year window about $58 million. That's about what we think it predicts. So all our intentions are to try and fit the costs associated with the field house and any additional parking that we can put together and negotiate a decent price associated with it would be covered by that, plus allocations of the infrastructure that you have in the CIPs for both the in the box or correction out of the box and the contingency money associated with that.
So you're going to pay cash for all those improvements. Is that correct? Is how I'm reading that? Because you said revenue sources, so I assume since you're not using debt, you must be doing with cash?
No.
You're going to issue debt with that $58 million?
We would issue debt that would fund, that creates the capacity to debt service $58 million.
$58 million of additional debt against, we don't have issued today, which competes with debt against our credit rating for flooding.
Our credit rating for flooding, if financed through the enterprise fund, does not compete against the credit rating that we have for general fund.
I'm not referring to the credit competing. You showed a chart last Tuesday that showed the per capita debt policy. And if we did our policy, how much of that policy we were consuming over the long run, you can pop that back up, I'm happy to walk through it. In the near term, they were roughly even, but this would generate additional per capita debt against the policy, independent of funding source.
sir.
We are exercising usable margin, which could be usable margin for flooding without competing and impacting our flood rating. That's what I'm referring to, the competition for usable debt, independent of the source of funding it. And this displaces capacity that otherwise would be available under our per debt capita policy for flooding projects. I think that is correct.
I would say it this way. The comparison of the chart that you referenced, the orange versus the gray, which was the two charts that you and I, your and Jessica, Miss Abbott's proposal versus the city manager's proposal, orange versus gray. The orange contained, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bradley, the orange contained a general fund allocation to support the 58 million associated with the construction of this project, plus the debt service for the out-of-the-box construction that had been appropriated 2 years ago, correct?
It supports 40 million, what's in your CIP. The additional 18 million would not be in that number. That would equate to about $40 more per capita.
But that is my point. If we choose to deal with a higher priority of flooding and not pursue this, this would free up $40 million that's in the current CIP that would lower down where Ms. Abbott and my proposal is, lower down using less, because we put neighborhoods in front of this project. And so it is an opportunity cost. It is consuming usable capacity for a nice to do over addressing flooding, and that's the point I was making.
Mr. Bradley, would not this funding source be from the hotel
Tip fund.
dollar tip fund
The 40
dedicated
million,
money?
along with the arena infrastructure, would be financed from the TIP fund.
It's not the funding source, it's the credit capacity that I'm referring to. I had a funding source to pay for what we were borrowing. It's the question of what does the amount between what we've currently issued in terms of debt and what portion of our usable capacity, because obviously we can't use all of it or it impacts our credit rating. So something less than 3,000 debt per capita is what's really available, whether it's 2,800 or 2,750 or 2,999. But obviously we can't use 3,000 without impacting our credit policy. That was the rhetoric that I heard last week. So if it's something less than that, then everything that we use for something other than flooding projects displaces what we can spend and invest on flooding project. It has nothing to do with the revenue source. It has to do with how we use the borrowing capacity that is available to us without having an injurious effect on our credit rating. And that is the issue I'm raising, not the source of funding.
Mr. Moss, if you elected to use tax-supported debt for stormwater projects, yes, you would leverage those dollars against our metrics for debt control. If you use revenue generated from the stormwater fee and you placed those dollars against debt service for stormwater projects, you would not affect.
But as you well know, our approach was not to raise the fee. What was in fact to use the light rail revenues, which we should use since it's public safety, to avoid having to use and to change the master revenue agreement to issue the debt. But in the end, that was our proposal on legal. And what we were told, in fact, even though that would be a revenue bond, at that point would be a revenue bond, a revenue consideration with pledged revenues at a higher consideration than public participation, which are subject to annual appropriation, which that bond agreement would not be. That's a different type. So I'm just trying to understand the consistency of the discussion last Tuesday and the discussion today, and I'm failing to see it.
And respectfully, we have a difference in opinion as to whether or not we should dedicate the entirety of light rail funding to a single source of infrastructure construction. And I believe that we should balance it to many of the requirements that we have, both for the infrastructure
I
improvement
think the
as
view
well
in
as
public
economic
understands my position.
I think John's made his point.
Yes, sir.
Barbara hasn't.
Well, I don't expect you to answer these questions today. As a matter of fact, I'd kind of like to have the answers in writing. I've jotted down 5 or 6 questions here. Number one, and kind of along the lines of what John is saying, now that we have this fairly complete proposal for these different large projects, I would like to see another rating from our bonding agencies if we do all of these and how they're funded and what the impact might be on our bond rating agency. I think we had such an analysis a year or so ago when we were looking at light rail and several others, so I would really like to see that. And particularly in that, how all of this is going to be paid for, particularly with this statement that no municipal parking charge for arena events year-round, makes me wonder how we're going to make a distinction between people who are using these garages for some other event, or does that mean they're all going to be free? I'm not sure how the payment is going to be, so that's kind of one question. Talking about parking garages, and number two, I'm glad we're finally getting there because nobody has mentioned building a parking garage until today, at least not in this session. Obviously, we were going to have to do that, and that's just not been acknowledged before. But what you did not present was page 27, which is the parking scenarios and the deficit of parking spaces with various combinations of things. I guess even building this parking garage that you're proposing, it looks like we have got significant parking deficits, on-site parking deficits, several times a year when we've got overlapping events. So how are we going to meet these other deficits, and how many parking garages are we really going to have to be building, and where will they be? That's kind of number two. And number three, even with that design of the on-site parking spaces, some of these parking spaces are over there by Bird Neck Road. How are we getting people to the convention center and to these things? I don't expect we're thinking they're going to walk all that distance in January. I'm assuming we're going to have some kind of people mover, and who's going to pay for that?
Right.
Or are people going to pay for it as they get on, or is that going to be one of those city operating expenses that we haven't been hearing about? And number four, if you are substituting some of the off-site projects that we had thought we were going to build as a part of our participation, because we're going to use that money for this proposal, I'm assuming those things will have to be built at some time with other projects. And so I'm assuming that they will become city expenses at some point when we do build that thing, which is going to precipitate the need for it. I think I saw that one of the others. So how are we going to accommodate those things that we were going to build but are not going to be building as a part of this? Number five, that really big drainage project that we don't have any money for in the proposal is that $100+ million Central Beach drainage project. I think is in this area, and I would like to see a picture, maybe this slide on 4, that you would just draw that big drainage project on here for me, because I'm concerned that it might overlap some of this. And when and how are we going to get that drainage project built? Because we don't have that anywhere in our proposal. And I certainly don't think we're going to build this kind of stuff in an area that's going to be needing some major drainage. So I want to know how that big drainage project that we're not addressing in this budget is going to be built, and when and how is that going to be paid for. And then my other question, my last question, I'm assuming we're saying that we're going to be coming back in a month or so and amending the budget we adopt next week to incorporate this? Is that what we're proposing?
Yes, ma'am. I think that will be exactly what we'll have to do. Once we know exactly what the costs are, we'll need to negotiate on what the cost per unit per parking space for the parking garage might be. We'll have to present you an economic rationale for wanting to do it. The cost per space, we would hope, would be significantly lower than any cost projection that we've ever had in a structured parking format because of the contractor that's operating inside the box, and hopefully without MOB, demob, and some other aspects, we would be able
So we're
to
not
take advantage of.
bidding that, then we're going to take what is that, what do you call that bidder?
Sole source.
Source bidder?
Right,
Sole source contract.
absolutely. For the parking garage, it would be in the box where the current allocation of parking associated with the arena would take place. I think the city attorney's office would opine that that would be inappropriate.
But you're-
We wouldn't
you're
operate
assuming
outside that.
That's going to be so we've got to at some point approve building the field house, because I don't think we've ever approved that as a project. So all of this, I guess, will come as an amendment to the budget in a couple of weeks or months or something.
We would have to come back to you to propose many of the answers that you, the answers to the questions that you've asked, and that is the financing structure proposed, cost estimates associated with our scope for the field house, costs associated with what the parking garage would be, and an acceptable financing plan within the dollars that we currently have, so that you would have a zero net increase to the budget associated with doing these projects to support the entertainment district.
Finish, Barbara.
Yeah, I just would like these, like I say, answered in writing as soon as possible.
Rosemary, you have a question?
I really wasn't going to bring this up right now. I was going to bring it up today, but in light of some of the things that John brought up regarding stormwater. A few years ago, I had brought up that I really thought that we needed to be engaging our businesses and our citizens to help us with stormwater, because at that time I said, government can't do it alone. We cannot solve all the stormwater needs by ourselves. We really need the help of our citizens and businesses. And so in light of all that's been going on, I really thought it was time to bring this idea up again. And I'm looking, and not today, but in the future, to maybe to put together a committee to study it, to look at, how we can engage our citizens and our businesses in stormwater and stormwater runoff, and what they can do. Richmond has a program, and they give a stormwater abatement by participating, and it's worked. It's worked there. So I'd love to have ideas from y'all in the meantime, and start maybe in the next few weeks start putting together something. So I think it's a timely thing to do.
Okay, wait a minute, John. Shannon, you
My question was, same as Barbara, have we voted that we want to do a field house? When are we voting on that? Just because is there a vote?
There is a CIP, ma'am, that's in the reallocated funding from light rail in the project list.
So just because it's in the CIP, we definitely are going to do it? Is that what that means?
It is a project that states that you are allocating $40 million towards the design, construction, and contracting for a field house.
You through, Shannon?
I got my answer. Thank you.
Okay.
But it has to come back to us for approval.
Let me get Bob.
The money's there, doesn't mean we've approved it.
Yeah, let me ask, are there any models out there where these type of facilities were put out to bid where they were publicly financed and operated by other companies instead of us taking it on?
Publicly financed and
No,
operated.
in other words, there's a private entity that would come in.
Yes.
And build this and run it themselves
Yes.
without us having to deal with it. Have we pursued that?
That's a consideration for the RFP.
Because, once again, I guess I have a concern right now, is that this seems to be moving forward without direction. And I think that is kind of the things, and, whether we like it or not, we live in a theater of perceptions, and we got far higher priorities right now. Public safety, other things, and I know it's different pots of money and everything, but also we're talking about developing the dome site. Would it not be prudent to wait until we have a plan with the dome site and put this in context, with the overall plan of what's going on, and then come up with a master plan for parking and everything at one shot instead of, it's kind of like last year, we're buying light rail cars and we didn't even approve or discuss light rail. So I just think this is putting the cart before the horse in a lot of ways, and there are other priorities right now.
Dave?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Vice Mayor. We have conducted a very rigorous study with regards to sports tourism. And it is the belief of our subject matter experts, it is the belief of the industry that it is the emergent tourism growth area. We presented you the Victa study. Clearly, we are in a very envious position as a beach coastal community with a high-quality convention center. The reason why we had Brad stand up a few minutes ago and show you just the tournament that went down during the weekend. We would love basketball players and basketball teams. They come in, they're very respectful, they're very well coached, they're very controlled. They don't trash our facility. I can tell you that not all the sporting engagements that we have are as sympathetic and concerned about our facilities, and we've entertained several other major sporting events that have been very rough on our convention center. The opportunity to move rapidly, to take advantage of this, to be able to enhance our resort industry, to be able to, and this has been recognized, Mr. Dyer, by our Hotel and Restaurant Association, who are willing to keep that dollar in place to create the capacity of this project. It is their number one project priority beyond the arena, is to get a field house in place. And I would tell you that's ahead of moving forward with the dome and entertainment site. And that is directly from them in their writings and their endorsements of moving forward with a field house.
And if I can, Mr. Hanson, I truly appreciate that, but I think one of the missing pieces that we have here at times is with projects like that, or even the consideration of why it's necessary to find an alternative to building one here, we got to get the civic engagement on this thing. Rather than going ahead and do that, then explain to people later why we're doing it. I think we got to be more upfront on this. And here we're being asked to vote on this respectfully as part of a budget package, which is a tacit endorsement of doing it. But once again, I think our public, the public is skeptical on state level and local and federal levels, that we have the obligation to explain to them why we do things. And you gave a very valid reason, but the point is that I think we have to do a better job of engaging our public in terms of how we make our decisions, especially, in times where budgets are stretched and, we're talking about raising taxes and everything. It's just that I think we got to do a better job, and I'm not sure I agree with the priority. I think it's a good idea, but if we can find somebody else that could pay for it and run it, with it, not on our dime, we haven't explored all the options yet, but here we got it. We're part of our budget package. So, thank you.
John Art.
Well, thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor. Well, first off, we've been talking about the dome site since 2006 or 2007, and I think, Bobby, you bring up a really good point in terms of doing these all simultaneously so that we've got a sense of what's going on. And I think when you take a look at the next steps, they're all being run concurrently, and that certainly is helpful in terms of our analysis of the parking needs for the district, in terms of our traffic, and also the symbiotic relationship of all the other things. But I think that, when we're starting to talk about the funding for this compared to all of the other needs throughout the city, I think it's important, and obviously everyone at this table understands it, but for us to recognize that this is being paid for by an industry that thinks that this project is so important that they have decided to tax their customers and their customers only to pay for it. And so, we're not having that happen. Obviously, there's plenty of other needs that we're having to fight over the general fund balance and all those types of things. But this is being funded through a hotel tax, which has been well, I mean, we're the ones that did it, but I mean, it was at the request of an industry to levy it to specifically build this project. And so I think that a lot of Barbara's answers will be, questions will be answered, and they'll be answered within the context of a system, because that's what we're really recognizing everywhere throughout the city, is that, if we are going to just have one parking space to serve one particular function, it's not near as efficient as if we have that one parking space that can serve an office patron during the day and a restaurant patron at night and a residential person at another time. So, none of the changes that are in here are in the CIP. Those are all, I actually asked for us not to do that reconciliation within this so that we can get through our budget deliberations and talk about this at a later time. But, the field house is in there, and that's, we had actually told that community when we levied that tax, which has now been in effect for over a year, that's what it was going to fund. And if we didn't plan on funding it, then we shouldn't have kept the tax on.
Thank you. Finished?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
John, do you have an
I
added
do.
comment?
I did go back and get the December 2nd, 2014, you may recall this briefing that we got. I would like to do my research on the credit evaluations for the arena, light rail, and other key projects. I'm sure Mr. Hanson remembers that. I think Mr. Spohr was the city manager at the time. At that time, we had $335,883,000 worth of debt we looked at issuing, which did not include all this structured parking. And the different scenarios included USM financing the arena. And when you looked at these things, which included also convention hotel, which we get frequent notices about telling us how come we should have one, that's another use of debt that would count, that they told us they was very cautious. In fact, they had characterizations of some of these projects as being less essential nature of the key economic development projects. So they were looking, they didn't look favorably upon what they thought the performance of those things would be, and also they called them less essential. I think they are correct, and talked about that you should be cautious. That was Moody's, and Fitch actually reduced the bond rating if we did all of that. That was one. So I think we need to take that into consideration. This is just a piece of the debt. They have other things that are in the CIP. There's actually $4 million of cash, if I remember correctly, in that field house. If I remember back in CIP, it's not all borrowing, there's $4 million of cash there in this current budget. But I think when you go and look, this gets back, I'd asked that a copy be made available to all the people on the council, because some are new since we had this, and until we get a refreshment, this is a good thing to refresh your memory what they had to say back then. But we ultimately are talking about rationing the borrowing capacity of the city, and how that rationing should be allocated, and what's the priority for which that rationing should be done. And this CIP does not present, nor have we had, that robust intellectual discussion. And I didn't vote for those taxes. I've made no promises to anyone. So you could speak for yourself or speak for the body, but I do not believe in making promises with the public's money.
All right.
In that
Anybody else?
ordinance, in fairness, it was
Yes, John.
specifically allocated towards the TIP fund with the recognition that we had made that statement. And if you didn't vote for it, that's fine, John. So, but that's what this council, as a body, voted for and approved.
Have you finished your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. We're deep into it, yes.
Yes, sir. You're finished?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. We need to go to the pending planning items.
Indeed, I'd like to invite Carolyn and
Here. Yeah, okay.
Kevin in, and they're going to provide us, this is one of those unusual months where we don't have planning items on here because of the timing associated with our planning commission and us, and maybe we'll figure it out somewhere this summer and get it ironed out.
Our meeting's back, we're going to conflict with the school board. would help.
Yeah, okay.
Welcome, Carol.
Good afternoon. Jimmy's getting me help set up here. We have 9 planning items that are scheduled for you on May 16th. And 8 of these items will be planning commission items that are being forwarded to you. And then we have 1 item that is a request of the Ocean Park Civic League for a neighborhood identification sign within the Shore Drive right-of-way. And Mark Shea is here. He is the lead planner to the Bayfront Advisory Commission, so he will very quickly give you the details of that request. So all of the 8 items coming to you from the Planning Commission are being recommended for approval by both the city staff and the Planning Commission. Item number 1, one item, item 7, did have some speakers in opposition at the Planning Commission meeting. This is a request for an expansion of a non-conforming use at the oceanfront on 27th Street. So I'll give you a little bit more detail about that when we get to item 7. Item 1 is a request for a modification to a conditional use permit that City Council granted back in late 2016 for motor vehicle sales as well as automobile repair. The property owner now, who is also the applicant, has a specific tenant in mind, and he would like to tweak those conditions that were approved back in 2016. So specifically, this is a request to increase the number of vehicles on the site that are awaiting repair or under repair from 4 to 8. And with this change, the Planning Commission added a condition to limit the number of vehicles on the site at any one time to 49 to ensure an orderly arrangement of those vehicles. Also, this is a request to deviate from the maximum height limit of the light poles of 14 feet up to 20 feet, specifically on the eastern portion of the site that is farthest away from the residential properties to the west. The Aragona Village Civic League is aware of this modification, and they are really eager to see the improvements begin on this property, and they are not objecting to this request. Item 2 is a request for a conditional use permit for a tattoo parlor within an existing shopping center off of General Booth Boulevard. Up to 4 workstations are proposed, and the applicant indicates that the hours will typically follow those of a typical retail operation. They are not proposing any changes to the exterior of the building other than adding signage over the entry, and no changes to the layout of the site as well. Item 3 is a request for conditional rezoning from B2 and R5D to conditional B2 Community Business District. The property owner of the B2 piece recently acquired the southern piece that is zoned residential. He desires to expand the parking lot in order to fully serve the existing office use that exists on that B2 piece to the north. So in order to accomplish this, he does need to rezone that residential property to a commercial district. So obviously the existing dwelling shown on that bottom left corner will be removed and replaced with a parking lot. And the applicant has provided safeguards to the neighborhood, including the required screening and buffering, along with a 6-foot-high solid privacy fence along that southern property line, which is shown in red. And they are proposing to eliminate the existing ingress-egress or the driveway on that residential piece. Item 4 is a request for a conditional use permit on a piece of property that is on Dam Neck Road that has 2 conditional use permits on it already. One for motor vehicle sales and a second for automobile service. And the applicant, who is also the property owner, had the opportunity recently to acquire a paint booth that he plans to permanently install on a piece of property that he owns to the south and adjacent with frontage on Holland Road. City Council has actually already approved a conditional use permit for motor vehicle garage repair on that property, and he is waiting until the improvements along Holland Road are complete before he begins development of that shop. So this request is really to temporarily install that paint booth within the existing building along Dam Neck Road. Planning Commission recommends a condition that limits the length of time for this conditional use permit to either 3 years from approval or to when the building adjacent is actually open for business, whichever comes first. No changes to the exterior of this building are proposed or to the site layout, so we really think that the installation of the paint booth within that building will be virtually undetectable from the rights-of-way. Item 5 is a request for a conditional use permit for an indoor recreation facility, specifically for a One Life fitness building to occupy about 70,000 square feet of the former Kmart building along General Booth Boulevard. We believe there is ample parking on this site for the One Life customers and employees, as well as for future occupants and customers of those that will use the remainder of this building. They are proposing some significant upgrades to the exterior, and we think this is really a good reuse of an otherwise vacant parcel or building along General Booth Boulevard. Item 6 is a request for a conditional use permit for an auto repair garage, where I think a Pizza Hut used to sit on this out parcel at the corner of Lynn Haven Road and Virginia Beach Boulevard. While this request is not a use that is in line with the Lynn Haven SGA plan, they are proposing some really significant improvements to the site. Their planting plan depicts material well above the minimum requirements, and they are proposing a significant safety improvement with the elimination of an existing ingress-egress at Lynn Haven Road. The bays will be oriented away from Virginia Beach Boulevard, and we think the building design will be complementary to the recently upgraded shopping center that's just to the north of this out parcel. Item 7 is a request to expand an existing non-conforming duplex on property that is zoned R5S. This site is on 27th Street, and it's adjacent to the Harris Teeter at the oceanfront. While the duplex is non-conforming in the R5S district, the Old Beach overlay does permit 2 units on this site in the form of a single-family dwelling with a garage apartment. You'll see that many properties along this block are zoned multifamily, that's the A12. And when staff was out in the field, we did see many more than one dwellings on properties along this portion of 27th Street. So this is not an anomaly to have a duplex located here, although it is non-conforming. The one-story improvements include a new first-floor restroom for each of the duplex units, a shared deck and office space, and a one-story small one-car garage for just one of the duplex units. There were 2 speakers in opposition who were primarily concerned with parking as well as traffic. We believe that this proposal will formalize some off-street parking that was not available before, and staff and the Planning Commission both recommended approval of this request.
Can we get a copy of the verbatim of the people that spoke or whatever they submitted?
Sure, absolutely.
And could you provide further amplification what formalized parking means in that
Sure.
too as well? Thank
Okay,
you.
yeah. So the last Planning Commission item on your agenda for the 16th is a request for a conditional use permit for an open-air market in order for a food truck to be operated at the recently approved Smart Mouth Brewery site, which City Council approved earlier this year. The applicant didn't realize until late in that conditional use permit review process that a use permit was also required for the food truck to operate there. So rather than delay them with the craft brewery request, we asked them to come back to you at a later time. So they are proposing to have just one food truck on this site from time to time, located within that red dashed area on the screen. It would be within 20 feet of the building. The food truck would hook up to the power of the building, so there's no need for any noisy generators. And just with the craft brewery, there has been absolutely no opposition to this request by the surrounding residents.
Ms. Henley has a question.
Are you saying that any food truck anywhere has to have a conditional use permit?
Yes, ma'am. Now, you can, up to 4 times a year, obtain a special event permit and have an event on a piece of property, and food trucks could be part of that event. But the ones that you see typically over and over again do have that open-air market conditional use permit.
Or a food truck, just as a food truck someplace has to have a conditional use permit.
Correct. All right. So Mark, you're up.
Good evening, Vice Mayor and members of council. The slide before you shows the proposed sign in the median of Shore Drive, and on the right-hand side is the location of where the two signs will be situated. This sign is made possible through the neighborhood identification sign policy, which was adopted by council in 2013. The application is by the Ocean Park Civic League. Andrew Broyle is the president, and he's also providing most of the volunteer services in making the sign. The city's historic preservation planner reviewed the text of the application to make sure that the history of the neighborhood warranted this type of sign, because it has to, reflect the historic significance of the neighborhood, and he said it certainly met that test. And the sign design, the applicant worked with the Bayfront Advisory Commission to replicate the similar type of design that the Bayfront Advisory Commission has been working with on their sign package. And so the design of the sign was endorsed by the Bayfront Advisory Commission. The sign has also been run through Public Works as far as the location goes, as far as safety and visibility, and it meets those tests, and the Parks and Recreation Department has approved the landscaping for the design. So basically, it is we've developed an application form to implement that policy, and has pretty much met the test as far as all the different review groups. So if you have any questions on it. Thank you.
Is that it? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think I'm going to skip down to the council agenda and try to get that settled before we get into the reconciliation. Under ordinances, item 1, anybody have a problem with 1? John, item 2, did you want to take that one out front, or?
Absolutely up front. I mean, it's deferred on Ben Davenport, most seconded by Jim Wood, but obviously it's something I talked about, so yes, I want that up front, yes.
Okay.
I'll talk about it. Hear it.
Oh,
Item 3, everybody okay with that? Item 4,
I want to talk about that out front as well, please.
You want to pull, Ben?
Yes, pull that. Has a long history to that.
item 5, everybody okay?
I'd like to add something. Is this where I do the adding?
In a minute.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it'll take all 8 people here.
Okay.
I know.
All right, let's do the ads now.
Jim and Rosemary and I have asked the city attorney's office to draft a resolution. I'm going to pass it out for each of you to see. Did you need a copy, or you?
I have a copy.
You already have a copy. There you go. Since I've never added anything to the agenda, I guess I'm just going to read this so that the public knows what we're adding. It's a resolution directing the city manager to find efficiencies and streamline project delivery to alleviate stormwater impacts upon the residents. Whereas the residents of the city are threatened by flooding and other rainwater effects, and whereas the city manager's proposed budget includes funding for a 15-year program to address the current stormwater infrastructure needs of the city, and whereas the city council has heard the concerns of the residents that the city needs to work diligently and expeditiously to deliver stormwater capital projects, and whereas the city council desires to unequivocally, I can't say that, express the importance of stormwater management among the issues before the council. Now therefore be it resolved by the city council of the city of Virginia Beach that 1, the city manager is directed to find efficiencies and streamline project delivery to alleviate stormwater impacts upon the residents of the city. 2, the city manager is directed to provide periodic updates to the city council outlining the progress of the stormwater program, with such updates provided on a quarterly basis unless otherwise directed. And 3, the city manager is directed to pursue all avenues available within current budget constraints to expedite stormwater project delivery, and if the manager becomes aware of opportunities during the fiscal year for acceleration or modification of stormwater projects, the manager shall present the council with the opportunity to pursue such opportunities, including where necessary, the supplemental appropriation of funds. And if it's passed today, it's adopted by the city council as effective today. We are putting this forward, and I hope that we could get all of your support today moving forward with this.
Okay, you want this on the agenda today, is that correct?
Rosemary, Jim, are you good with that? Yes. Yes, sir.
You'll have to make a motion to do that when we go out into the formal session.
Thank you for educating me.
If I could just make a comment about this, I'm sorry I hadn't seen this. It's kind of ironic that we've got all these things here today on a day that we've got a very large part of the city underwater. We've talked about, these other things that are coming in. Of course, this underwater situation is not from storm, even though we did get rain last night. It was flooded before the rain and would have flooded without any rain. But this is a particular tidal situation. And it's been going on for a long time, like forever, and I guess it will continue, and I'm not sure that there's much that can be done. But I would like certainly to have this phenomenon continually looked after, and I think part of it may come simply in preventing building to be developed or structures to be developed in floodplains or whatever. But I know that, for example, in designing the Nemo A Sandbridge road improvement, one of the things that caused that project to escalate a bit was the raising the elevation of the road in that particular area that it floods. But that project, for example, is not one that's funded as a road project now. We've still got to fund it. But now that it's designed and permitted, doing that one project, and of course, when we build the bridge next year, that's going to be raised somewhat. So that is a project that will assist in this chronic flooding, but we certainly aren't going to be raising Muddy Creek Road and Mill Landing Road and all those other many, many roads around down there that flood. And just some acknowledgement to the people that we're aware of this event and are looking at whatever possibilities might come along the way. But it's kind of tough on folks, and folks do have water in their houses today, and a lot of places people can't get home, and it's pretty bad. And so just to let you know that it happens in a lot of places around the city, not just one or two neighborhoods.
In this resolution, Mrs. Henley, I think we hope to address the whole city, and that if we can find efficiencies and we can have periodic updates on that, is we're all the better for it. And
If we
hope
could
that we can
possibly
get your
add
support.
maybe stormwater and chronic flooding.
I'm
Wait just
okay
a
with
minute.
that.
We got a conversation going here with, do you,
Where would you put it?
That's what I was looking at.
you have a suggestion where it should go?
I'm just looking to, I see, well, I'll look while you listen to what John has to say.
All right, why don't you and Shannon get together before the formal session and
We will.
work it out, okay?
My comment is, I will not be supporting it. I think it's a tacit admission that the city manager's budget represents the best answer, the best solution, and represents the best that can be done when it absolutely does not. And I refuse to put any tacit compliance with that, so I will not vote for it.
Even if your budget were to pass, John, you wouldn't want the city manager to come back to us periodically to find even more savings and cost efficiencies?
He's incapable. Or he would have proposed something different.
You
He's
appointed
done-
him just like we all did. If you say he's incapable, that's
I
not
didn't vote for
cool.
his contract, and don't ask me to vote again.
All right, I think we've talked about that enough. If we can move on, we've got something pretty important to do here. I've tried to talk to everybody, and I've received suggestions from a number of you as to changes that you want to make on the budget proposal. And so I've had the city manager write up a summary of those changes, and I'd like to pass out the letter of that I've signed because the mayor is not here, and we need to move on and try to get the budget resolved. So Barbara, would you pass it down? Just like to, if I may, read the letter, and then we can have any comments anybody has about the letter. It's the fiscal year 2017-18 operating budget and CIP reconciliation. Dear City Council members, after lengthy discussions with you and listening to public input at the various public meetings, town halls, public hearings, and via email, it's recommended that the operating budget and CIP be adopted with the following adjustments. Number one, the Department of Finance has ruled that fiscal year 2015-16 HRT true-up must be paid in fiscal year 2016-17 for accounting purposes. The HRT true-up $1,572,465 will be paid from the Tourism Investment Program Fund, $386,072, and a portion of the remaining light rail funds, $1,186,393 in fiscal year 2016 and 17 instead of the fiscal year 2017-18 budget. This will be accomplished through a transfer authorized by the fiscal year 2017-18 operating budget ordinance and effective in fiscal year 2016-17. The TIP fund reserve for future commitments in fiscal year 2017-18 will increase by $386,072. The $1,186,393 would have reverted to fund balance to pay for general government CIP projects in the fiscal year 2017-18 CIP. Instead, the general fund portion for the mass transit true-up in fiscal year 2017-18 will be used as pay-as-you-go financing. The net result to the fiscal year 2017-18 operating budget is the same. 2, to address storm water concerns, increase from 0.8 cents to 1 cent the portion of the real estate tax allocated in the CIP to stormwater projects and decrease the portion of the real estate tax allocated for general government projects by the same amount. Funding of $1,084,100 will be allocated to a new stormwater project entitled Lake Chubb Bradford Lake in each year of the CIP. Funding is reduced by $1,084,100 in each year of the CIP as identified below. CIP 9028 Lynn Haven Parkway Corridor improvements in fiscal year 2017-18 and fiscal year 2018-19. CIP 3-139 various site acquisitions in fiscal year 2019-20. CIP 3-137 various buildings, rehabilitation and renewal 3 in fiscal year 2020-21 and fiscal year 2021-22. CIP 3-504 beach maintenance facility in fiscal year 22 and 23. Item 3, in an effort to support various organizations in our historic homes based on citizen input concerning the importance of these organizations, increases are recommended in fiscal year 2017-18 in the following amounts. A, Children's Hospital, the King's Daughters, $25,000. B, Arts and Humanities Commission, $2,000. C, Southeastern Tidewater Opportunity Project, $13,700. D, Atlantic Waterfowl Museum, $13,033. E, Old Coast Guard Museum, $14,908. And F, Historic Houses Special Events, $49,000. In order to offset these increased contributions, a reserve set aside for grant opportunities of the non-departmental section of the budget will be reduced by $117,641. 4, to compensate the sheriff in a manner consistent with the methodology that has been in place since 2006, the sheriff's stipend is recommended to be increased by $12,363 with associated FICA taxes. This increase is offset by a decrease in the reserves of the Sheriff's Special Revenue Fund of the same amount. 5, $50,000 for the lake treatment program with a stormwater reserve for contingencies decreased by the same amount. 6, now that a June 2017 opening for the Kempsville Recreation Center has been determined, it is recommended that the Parks and Recreation Department delay the implementation of increased Recreation Center membership fees for 6 months. The fees will become effective on January 1, 2018 instead of July 1, 2017. This delay will allow the staff to address the initial increase in attendance and membership purchases that typically occurs with the opening of a new recreation center. Due to the delay, it is recommended that revenue from recreation center memberships be reduced by $100,000 and that this decrease in revenue be offset by a decrease in the transfer to the CIP. Further, we recommend that the pay-as-you-go funding to the Parks and Recreation CIP be reduced by $100,000 with the same reduction to CIP 4300, Community Recreation Center Repairs and Renovations 3. Item 7, increase funding for tax relief for the elderly and disabled by $450,000 with a corresponding decrease in the general fund reserve for contingencies. This increase in funding is mainly due to a higher than projected amount of tax relief for disabled veterans and their spouses. Item 8, increase funding to emergency communications and citizen services by $250,000 to support 6 full-time employees in order to restore the 311 call center to 24/7 operations. This cost will be offset by an increase in interest income of the same amount. Item 9, increase CIP 5-101, Vibes District Water Improvements by $600,000 in fiscal year 2017-18 with a corresponding increase of $600,000 in retained earnings in the water utility CIP. This project is being increased to correspond with roadway projects that have been accelerated. 10, increase CIP 6-101, Vibes District Sewer Improvements by $1 million in fiscal year 2017-18 with a corresponding increase of $1 million in retained earnings in the sewer utility CIP. This project is being increased to correspond with roadway projects that have been accelerated. 11, increase CIP 3-344 Police 4th Precinct replacement by $925,000 in appropriations to date with a corresponding reduction in appropriations to date in CIP 5-509 replacement of the Kempsville Recreation Center. 12, CIP reduce CIP 2-141 Norfolk Southern Right-of-Way Acquisition Fund by $20 million in fiscal year 2017-18. This reduction is offset by a $20 million reduction in general fund balance in the fiscal year 2017-18 CIP. This is due to the repayment of this amount to the state as authorized by City Council in the current fiscal year. 13, increase CIP 3-292 Virginia Aquarium Marine Animal Care Center by $2 million in fiscal year 2017-18, with a corresponding increase in revenue from a contribution from the Aquarium Foundation. And 14, modify the roadway section of the CIP by reducing CIP 2-111 Traffic Safety Improvements Phase 5 by $1,029,624 in fiscal year 2020-21, reducing CIP 2-078 Sandbridge Road, Nemo Parkway Phase 7A by $1,009,376 in fiscal year 2020-21, and increasing the project by $2,039,000 in fiscal year 2021-22, and increase CIP 2-088 West Neck Road Phase 4 by $2,039,000 in fiscal year 2020-21, and reducing the project by the same amount in fiscal year 2021-22. The details for the funding sources and the adjustments are identified on the attachments that you have with the letter. I want to thank the public who came out to the various town hall meetings and public hearings to offer their comments on the fiscal year 2017-18 operating budget and CIP, as well as staff for their efforts to provide answers to our various questions. If you have any questions, please let me know directly, and I sign by myself. We'll open for discussion. Anybody have any comments?
I can just have a question and clarify the reason for these traffic safety road readjustments, particularly mentioning that Sandbridge Road Nemo Phase 7A seems to be, I know it's not funded for construction, but I was hoping we could get it funded as soon as possible. This seems to make it all go to the year 21-22. Is that the reason, or what is the rationale here?
Dave?
Tom, you want to address that or not? It's in an effort to accelerate West Neck Road. I mean,
Well, West Neck just seems to be changing its own money from one year to the next.
Well, what happens is it moves the money up in West Tech 4, it moves the money in Nemo out a year, but that wasn't gonna be fully funded until then anyway, so it doesn't really delay Nemo, but it does manage to speed up West Tech by 1 year.
Well, I guess the problem is that we don't have any funding for construction for the Sandbridge Road project at this time. Is that correct? We're still working on trying to get that, but this certainly won't curtail any of that. I would hope if we have one of those magic times when some infrastructure money comes available like we have in the past from the federal government or the state, that project will be at a top priority since it's designed and permitted and ready to go.
As Phil Pullen has indicated, they are trying to get that project shovel ready. Design, permitting, and acquisition.
Okay, well, that's the important thing.
Okay, did you?
I would just say that recent developments indicate we've been able to at least uncover $2 million recently in a closed-out project through VDOT's reconciliation, but we're still, $2 million versus the $5 million you're looking for. So we're in the hunt, Miss Henley, believe me. And with the ongoing events that you don't have any greater need than what you got going on right now.
Shannon?
Dave, can you explain to me on the Lynn Haven Parkway improvements, the CIP 9028, how much we lost there when we prioritized that in our workshop as something we wanted to do, and then it's been cut by $1,084,000 each year? How much are we cutting? I mean, how much is left?
There'll be about $1 million per year. It was a $4 million investment for $2 million per year. And in order to increase the stormwater commitment to 1 full cent and increase the ability to do more stormwater projects across the city, we took a look at the list of projects in the general government on page 27 of your executive summary, and you can't pick ones that have dollars in the out years other than the years that the expenditure is in. And the immediate dollars that we found that were of a lower concern was that the Lynn Haven corridor project. So about 50% of what you had expected is cut from that project in order to move to stormwater.
You know, it's kind of ironic that I've been pushing and pushing to get more money for stormwater, and we committed as a council that this is a priority, and all of a sudden, I've got this funding, but it's from the project that all of the merchants in our district said they wanted and they needed, and the exact amount, $1,084,100 each year, goes to this new stormwater thing, which is coincidentally exactly the amount that we're taking away from the projects that we had committed to for mine these other 2 years. I just have a problem with that, but anyways, just thought I'd make that for the record.
Jim?
Well, I was going to mention that as well, because I appreciate the addition of the was it Lake Chubb, Bradford Lake, because the vice mayor and a couple of us met with Delegate Stolley and a good group of people from Public Works to talk about that. And that's certainly a serious issue. But, you know, I have to agree with what Shannon said. Lynn Haven Parkway was a high priority in our council retreat. So, you know, my suggestion, and I've got a couple of other notes in here that I'm not going to belabor, but I think that we need to find that money somewhere else other than that project, because that is a priority that was in our retreat. So,
All right, Dave, you'll be looking?
You know, I would, I'd default back to the council, and I would pull up my executive summary, and I would go to page 27, and you can do exactly as I did, and that is to look at the general government contract projects that are here, and we're happy to tell you where those expenditures are. We've allocated that $1 million per year in the years that they are programmed, and if this was our first recommendation based on priorities and based on the allocation and the years that the monies were coming out of.
Can you give us a chart then that shows where they are? Because this shows the entire 6-year CIP.
Sure.
So we don't have to go back through and look at each one of these.
Sure, I'd be happy to give you a spreadsheet
where they
that
are
shows
in
that,
each of these
and
years.
we'll produce that, and we'll have it to you first thing in the morning. Yes, sir.
John?
My question, since you did mention it, I assume then that your reconciliation includes the increase of 1.025 cents in real estate for kindergarten, which generates about $6 million when their actually validated requirement next year is only for 2.6. So you're endorsing giving them over and above what their actual requirement is in next fiscal year for full-day kindergarten by the school board's own admission. I just want to make sure that you're supporting that. Okay, just want to make sure that for the record. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else got any comments? Then we will look to see if we can find any money to replace the Lynn Haven Parkway money. And other than that, it appears that we have a majority in favor of the reconciliation. Is that correct? Shannon?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Are you in favor of the reconciliation other than the comment you made, or?
Yes, if I can get that fixed, yes, sir.
John? Jim?
If we can get the one.
Rosemary?
Yes.
Depending on where that 1.8 might come from somebody else's project. So I'm sure it will be.
Come from somewhere
Hi,
else.
Barbara.
I don't
Depends on
want it
whose
to
ox
come
gets
from that
scored.
Sandbridge project.
Barb, other than that,
Yeah.
I mean, Bob?
Yeah, I just got some major concerns about raising taxes for full-day kindergarten.
Well, John?
I have too much respect for how people work for the money. I can't support this.
All right, well, so other than the Lynn Haven Parkway money, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here, the majority of the people at the table who are in favor of the reconciliation letter. So take a look at that Lynn Haven thing and see what you can do, Dave.
Yes, sir, we'll get her done.
Right. All right,
Like it doesn't rain.
truly. I skipped, now go to city council liaison report. Yes, Jim?
I have a report, just some information I'll pass around. If you guys could stick it at the people who aren't here places. This is some information from HRT that I put together. It's a lot of paperwork here, but it's some interesting 2016 origin and destination survey of HRT, which shows where the customers go. In addition, there's some financial data here. Yeah, that's in here that shows HRT's new method of financial reporting. And the interesting thing is they're now looking at each individual city's potential true-up. And if the fiscal year ended today, Virginia Beach would get a $155,000 check back from HRT. Norfolk would get $745,000, but then Newport News would pay $35,000, Portsmouth would pay $15,000. But it shows that they've been driving this down. So it's a lot of data, and I just recommend if y'all could just look at it at your leisure. It's there.
All right. Yes.
On this add-on, I look at the title of the resolution, and with just where it says delivery to alleviate stormwater and chronic flooding impacts. And that same language in number 1, alleviate stormwater and chronic flooding impacts upon residents of the city, including flooding.
There's something else we might want to add. Maybe we'll bring it back another week. Let's talk after.
This is fine. I mean, if,
Well, but if there's not unanimity to add it today, you can't add it because it takes 8 votes.
pardon?
Can't go on today's agenda. We didn't need all votes,
We need a supermajority.
To add it to the agenda for consideration.
because it wasn't advertised.
Everybody's got to vote for it. Since John doesn't want to vote for it, then
We
we'll
need
just put it
9
on
votes.
a regular schedule.
Okay, I see. I'm sorry.
Doesn't
So-
matter, we'll just add it
I
next
didn't know
time.
if I had done
Right on
something
the
that was
16th.
holding it up.
Or can't we just put it on next week?
Next week's a special meeting, so we can't add it. Mark said we have to wait till the 16th.
It's not gonna matter. It's not that time sensitive.
All right.
Won't be here.
Council comments. It's a mighty quiet group today. All right. You got the closed session. Chair will entertain a motion to recess into a closed session pursuant to the exemption from open meetings allowed by Section 2.2-3711A Code of Virginia as amended for the following purposes: publicly held property, discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for public purpose, or of the disposition of publicly held property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A3, Beach District, legal matters, consultation with legal counsel, and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation or briefing in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body, or consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to Section 2.2, 3-3711A7. Dr. Alan L. Bergano et al. Versus City of Virginia Beach et al. Personnel matters, discussion, consideration of, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1, council appointments, council, boards, commissions, committees, authorities, agencies, and appointees. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Finley? Aye. Mr. Dyer?
Aye.
Mr. Moss?
Aye.
Davenport? Mr. Babbitt? Mrs. King? Aye. Mr. Wilson? Aye.
Aye.
And you do it.